Okay, well, welcome everybody to the virtual community meeting today. I'm very excited about this one, the an epic challenge, because it really talks about well, you can see what it's like. You've been through there, so that is the meeting today. But as when we start the meetings, we always go through just a little bit of check-in. We're Passive House California. We're the sponsor and the host. We are a part of the Passive House Network and with the IFA, with the International Passive House Association and the Passive House Institute. So we're hopefully and the presentation today is a passive house building. It's a FIAS they're using, but it's still that is a passive house building that is there. I want to thank our sponsors with Small Planet Supply, Minotaur, and Earthbound Homes are all silver sponsors for, and just recently renewing. And then we have our supporting sponsors, 475 Rockwool, Fergus Garber, Stiebel Eltron, Hayward Lumber, the Heinrich Teams, a local realtor, Pete Moffett Construction, and let's see, Ream, the water, well, you know who the Ream is, CPHBA, Good Space Builders, Prosoco, and Intelligent Membranes. And we just got a new sponsor that just came on board, Icon Windows and Doors from New York. So welcome to them as well. Those are our sponsors. We're very pleased. Since we're a nonprofit, the sponsors are a big part of our being able to continue what we do. And I want to say thank you to Sean and to Redwood Energy. I'm very excited about this, and I'm now going to stop share, Sean, so that you can.
All right then. Hey folks, it was a pleasure to meet my subcommittee here. I'm going to go into this microgrid proposal, and this was the highest scoring application. It is hard. It has been like a real brain buster. They call it the next epic challenge. They meant that, man. It has taken our team so much work, so much. So here's the team. EPRI, it's a global utility consultancy. They had microgrid expertise on their team, very helpful. Danco, so I helped start this company when I was an affordable housing developer. We started a new division. It's called Danco Communities, and the first projects we got funded on, USDA Rural Development gave scoring to Zero Net Energy. That was all electric. So that's 2007 is when I started working on how to do an all electric 100% solar powered project, and they're still fantastic to work with. They gave us all of our cost information and gave us the thumbs up that we could do it. Redwood Energy, a whole bunch of people on my team. We've worked, there's probably a dozen of us that worked on this. Mithon, wonderful architecture firm, lovely designs. I'll get to show you some drawings. PAE did terrific analysis that you'll see some of their graphs. Then the Rajos Institute doing local community training. L&T Controls has been making us think on how we can control the whole system. Okay, credit where credit's due. Now, the site we're talking about is in Petaluma. That's the North Bay of the San Francisco Bay. I'm giving a presentation. Can I help you? Yeah, good. Yeah. Sorry, I just got to give lunch money to my kid who's homesick. Great, buddy. Okay, so it's in kind of a urban suburban mixed site. It's got a train line going next to it. So on the right hand side here, part of this development is a future train station that they're already working on for this smart train, and it's going to be all EV charging. Okay, that was nice. Our apartments are next to it. You can see drawings on the bottom where what we're going to be building is carports that span the drive aisle of the parking lot, as well as covering up the roofs. That was the only way that we could get to this to about 95% off grid, was having a solar array that's roughly 3 times what Zero Net Energy would be, so that we can make energy in the winter. Here we go. Petaluma, California, 131 family housing apartments, 33 of them for people who are coming off the streets that are families, might be individuals, but it's a mixture. There's so many homeless people in California, you really have your pick. It's sad to say. So 7 buildings, mixtures of 2, 3, 4 bedrooms, some 1 bedrooms too. 5 acres, mixed use development. There'll be commercial uses next door. There'll be a nonprofit on site providing social services. And we're going to have 6 food trucks, electric food trucks, each with a 60 amp connection. They make those now. So it's a transit oriented development. There's 13 electric buses that Petaluma has that'll be coming to this, and we're setting up charging stations. Okay. So this is all competitive. We all do the very, very best that we could possibly do to figure out in order to win a $9 million total grant, which we've also added about $3 million more in incentives. California has special incentives for batteries that are very helpful, for instance. So we're pretty much getting a free battery, even this huge battery. Okay, so we're putting in edible landscaping, which is a specialty of mine. I've written a book on how to do edible landscaping, all the fruit trees that work well, and particularly in apartment complexes, like things that are eaten quickly, don't have thorns, that kind of thing. We've got it down to passive house design. So it's got a 2.9 EUI. I'm not really sure. I mean, considering the size of the solar array, I think that number should be negative. I don't know what that means because we're 3 times what zero net energy would be. But I'll show you all the things that we did. And I already mentioned the e-mobility. Petaluma is working with us because we want to have EVs there on day one for these low-income customers. And I'm going to show you our bi-directional EV charging of the batteries. We want EVs on day one. So the city of Petaluma is setting up an e-mobility hub. They already have buses. They're also going to have cars now so that we can have community cars parked there. So our tenants don't have personal cars necessarily. They have community share cars that they pay for to some degree, and we're going to be subsidizing. That allows us to have EVs on day one doing bi-directional charging without making the tenants go out and get them. So, passive house. I love thermocork. It's a wood siding material that's R4 per inch. It's out of Europe, because Portugal is like 90+% of all the world's cork comes out of Portugal, which is in Western Eurasia. When they take the cork granules, they expand them under heat, and it's just like making rice cakes. When I grew up on, I had wheat allergies, poor me. So I had rice cake sandwiches, and you puff rice, and then the rice glues together to make rice cakes. It's the same thing with these cork cakes. And they make them into up to like 3-4 inch wedges of them. And so what we found here, if you look at the notes on the side, R4 per inch of the siding, it's a siding material. It sequesters 7 times the CO2 involved in the harvesting, the processing, and shipping it to California. So it's a net carbon sequestration device. It's got natural fire resistance. That's why oak trees grow them in Portugal, because it's so hot and dry there. There's fires every summer, and this is a naturally fire-resistant wood product. And what I love about this is that we found that 3 inches of painted thermocork that installs for $16 a square foot. It's $20 a square foot to put 3 inches of foam insulation under painted hardy plank siding, cementitious standard siding that you'd put on an apartment complex. And then passive house, we're taking the air tightness down to 0.6 air exchanges per hour. And we're doing this because the peak of energy demand is in the wintertime. That's when we need the most energy. And the trough of solar production is in the wintertime. So we need to work on our wintertime energy use intensity. Not just any old time in the year. It really is a very winter-focused design that we have here. I'll keep on getting into that. Here are our high winter efficiency appliances. On the left-hand side, we are putting these Rheem heat pump water heater tanks, and they could be A.O. Smiths, but Rheem is what Danco has been using classically. We're going to be putting them into louvered closets inside the apartments so that we can draw from the warmed air of the apartments. These apartments actually, they have enough insulation that frequently they have an air conditioning load even when it's not hot outside, just because there's enough warmth being produced inside. So these are nice because they are essentially a tiny air conditioner. There's much air conditioning as if you left your freezer and your refrigerator door open, plus about 30% more. And so if you left your refrigerator door open for, say, 6 hours, that's the amount of cooling that this water heater does in a day for heating your hot water. So not that much. Then here, But it's important is that we were comparing them to CO2 heat pump water heaters. So we get a COP, the efficiency of 3.1 in the wintertime on these tanks when they're inside the apartment's envelope. And then we get a 3.5 outside with CO2 sand and heat pump water heaters that were then recirculating down. This is all, we have field research on this going back since 2014. So I'm pretty clear that these are fair numbers that I'm showing you here. Okay, if you assume that with me. So the difference in cost was $3,800 an apartment. That's what Danco does as a standard for the tank types, versus $14,700 an apartment if we put in the sand-ins. And since the coefficient of performance was like 15% lower, like, it's not the right place to put the money. So then we have these Afocas. Now we have 2, 3, and 4 bedroom apartments, as well as 1 bedrooms. If we were to do ductless mini splits, our standard would be to have 1 fan coil in every room, in the living room and in the bedrooms. So in these scenarios, which we're always going to a room and putting a heat pump in it, essentially, with a fan coil, a compressor outside, pardon me, these Afocas, they sit on the wall. There's 2 duct holes through the wall, 6 inches or 8 inches. They pull air into this heat pump box, and then they blow air out that box. The air doesn't come into the residence. Now, this is going to require some air sealing work, right? This is going to be one of our main penetration issues. But we have others that are the same thing, the fans that go out, you know. So these come with ERVs built into them. We're not clear yet if we're going to do an ERV distribution system or if we're simply going to use the ERV functionality of each one of these. It bulks them out about 4 inches off the wall further. So I'm not a big fan. But look at this. The COP of these is 3.5 in the wintertime. Now, if we did ductless mini splits, the most efficient, and we did a lot of research, the most efficient ductless mini splits, multi-head, the highest efficiency we can get is a COP of 3.2 in the wintertime. So this is our most efficient option, and it was our cheapest option. $11,000 an apartment versus $15,000 an apartment. Got all of our costs from Danco. These are a big GC. They do many apartment complexes a year with these Afocas, with these heat pump water heaters. So we're really pleased because that $11,000 versus $15,000, that's a difference. That $4,000, look, that's the cost of the entire water heater. Those kinds of savings, when you look at HVAC is usually 3/4 of the cost of all the appliances that you put into the apartments or houses for that matter. So focusing on a lower cost, high efficiency HVAC system is where cost efficiency happens. You can't save that much money with your water heater, although I guess in this case we did going from the sand-ins down to reams. That was $10,000 we saved per apartment. Okay, induction stoves, but usually the HVAC system is the place to get the efficiency savings. So the induction stoves, if you use that same metric of a COP, induction stoves are 0.85, electric resistance is 0.60. Not a whole lot of energy savings. $900 versus $700 is what we could get the lowest pricing on. And induction is $400 with a Sonoma Clean Power rebate. And here are the only heat pump dryers for commercial applications available in the United States, made by Miele, I think is how you say them, M-I-E-L-E. I see Morgan nodding. Thank you for confirming. So we got a 7-year payback with the greater efficiency versus standard electric resistance dryers that are always used in apartments. Okay, 7 years is pretty good. Now, what these different efforts showed us in savings, this red dotted line is our baseline for Title 24. So better lighting got us savings here. These are bars of the savings amounts, lighting, windows, envelope. Those are passive house, and it's not that much, but it is the most when we need it in the wintertime. Looking at over that on the right-hand side, this is the winter. I have the CEUI, that's referring to the fact that it's in the wintertime. Cold EUI is what that stands for. So look how the envelope makes a bigger difference there. But the windows, not a big deal. Those are saving energy during the summertime for air conditioning, but not doing us much in the wintertime. But the envelope is still helping us a lot. Solar heat gain coefficient, that's a chunk of the windows, and that is helping us out, that part of the efficiency. HVAC, though, This is compared to the Title 24 standard, keep in mind, federal minimum efficiency heat pumps. And Title 24 standard has very high efficiency envelopes. So this is a comparison. It's not all, perfect numbers. Domestic hot water, and then some work on plug loads. Here is what this looks like from our carbon intensity. Our goal was at least 30% reduction. And that siding all of a sudden is doing the heavy lifting. Thermocork siding, that's 14% reduction because we're replacing cement siding. Cementitious fiberboard, hardy plank, has a lot of embodied carbon in it because it's a cement product. It would be similar though, like aluminum is a very carbon intensive product. All sorts of siding products compared to wood siding, which is a carbon sequestration product. It's 7 times more, right, than just the energy used to harvest and deliver it. So it's doing a lot of heavy lifting. Then our low carbon concrete comes in, and we have excellent resources for low carbon concrete in the Bay Area. So that's an additional 12%, an additional 8%. So we got 14% out of the thermocork, 8% out of all the things. This is the whole project's carbon intensity. 8% of the whole project by going to low carbon concrete. Then low carbon drywall, low carbon insulation with cellulose, linoleum flooring, and the mass timber carport, which is only 1% more. So this is how we got to a total of 30%. And I just want to say it again, that thermocork is doing a lot of work. Now you can see our mass timber solar carport here, and I'm going to talk about solar, battery, and vehicle-to-grid electric vehicles for grid services. Now I'm looking in the chat. If anyone has any questions or you want to raise your hand, this is for you, not for me to talk. So if you've got any stuff, raise your hand and I'll answer questions, just so you know. All right. So why did we win? Why is this project a game changer? Well, we're trying to imitate what's already happened in Utrecht, so we're getting bonus points for that. This is our first scaled bidirectional parking lot in North America. So that means that we'll have at least 50 of the parking spaces with the chargers that can take electricity from the car and put it into our central battery for the whole apartment complex. We need that maybe 3 weeks of the wintertime. So this will make this the first 95%, and it'll be 100% if we have the EVs, resilient apartment complex. Can be completely off-grid, day in and day out, all loads being met, all loads. And we're going to show you that this illustrates the financial case and the technical case for doing this. And in California, where getting hookups, like if you submit your plans to PG&E, they get back to you a year later with their first round of comments. You can have your building permit in hand and have them be like, nope, no, different trenching, different boxes, different everything, don't want that. Happens all the time. So we were asked by our developer partner, we actually had such a hassle. We got kicked off the first one. The developer wasn't, like the city didn't like that developer. And instead we got lucky with Danco because a different city did like Danco and gave them this site and yada, yada. So we came in and Danco says, hey, our number one problem is getting hookups with utilities. Number one problem, not even getting financing and funding. It's just we can't get PG&E, SoCal Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric to respond to anything in a timely fashion. And they change stuff on us all the time and it freaks everybody out. So we said, hey, we can do this off grid. You don't even have to ask for a hookup if you don't want to. And they said, yes, please show us how to do that. And then we got a grant. So this is the details of what it would look like if we're doing code minimum. We would put in a 250 kilowatt solar array. This is what it kind of looks like from the roof. So just be on the roof of the buildings. We put in 142 kilowatt hours of battery, which would get us 2 hours of off-grid. That's it. And you can think of it as roughly 1 kilowatt hour per apartment. So a Tesla Powerwall is 13.5 kilowatt hours. We're required to put in 1 Tesla Powerwall for every 13 apartments. That's the code minimum. And that is only the code minimum on the biggest building. The big building has like 1/3 of the apartments. So let's say that all of these apartment buildings were 4 stories tall. It would be, in that case, more like, well, it would be about 1/3 of a Powerwall per apartment. But because these are 3-story buildings mostly, there isn't a battery requirement. It only shows up with 4-story tall buildings. Okay, so just for people who are interested in batteries, in California, you end up putting up somewhere between 1 to 3 kilowatt hours per apartment. That's the right way to put it, and not leave the fraction of a Powerwall out of it, but a Powerwall is 13. You can do your own math on it. Okay, so then people driving around with just an average 38 miles per day of average driving, and you getting gas in California, which is roughly $5 a gallon, you are going to spend about $3,000 up to $4,000 a year on gas. So the energy burden here for their utilities would be $600 a year to PG&E and $3,000 a year to the gas station, $3,600 total. What we're doing instead is we are maximizing the roofs once again, and we're putting in these very large spanning carports. These are a draft design that has to be finalized with the fire department, and I have a fire department-ish design that I just don't have in my slide deck yet. It's close to this. So this is, if we were doing code minimum, it's about half zero net energy. The solar panels compensate for about half your annual use. We're putting in something that is 3 times zero net energy. Okay, so that's about 6 times more solar than code minimum. And that's going to come in and be able to cover everyone's driving costs. So it's free driving and it's no cost for living in the apartments. No energy burden at all. We're putting in a 4,000 kilowatt hour battery, which 29 hours grid outage without solar. So we can hang out for a day or two without any, like with the grid being off. Of course, the sun comes up every day, so it's not a big issue. But yeah, once we have our solar on, basically we can go all year, all the time, except for about 3 weeks a year in which there's like a 4 or 5 day long rainy storm, and then we run out of power. And we're going to have a grid standby power. I'll mention this in a second, but just so you know, it's either the EVs or the grid standby power. So the California Energy Commission, they can make up their own code that was mentioned by some folks, trying to get past it has to be the code minimum. They do their analysis over 30 years, and we found that this system started making money at 20 years by comparison to the code. And we have very conservative assumptions, meaning like low assumptions of what the increase in PG&E's electricity would be, because we see 20 to 40% increases every year for about the last 10 years. And we're assuming like, oh no, not 40%. It would be like 6%, 10%. I wish that we had that, but so this is conservative is my point. Our proposed microgrid, the cost is mostly the solar array, not so much the battery. We have to make energy. Storing it is important, but we could, and we've done this analysis of like, well, what's the minimum amount of solar array and the maximum amount? We're kind of at the right balance for what our goal was of being off-grid. It's better to try to push and make the energy during the wintertime than it is to try to save it indefinitely. So then the standby tariff, you're like, are you allowed to do that? Yeah, hospitals do it all the time. Campuses for colleges do it all the time. Fire departments do it all the time. Everyone has got on standby power. It turns out that lots and lots of customers have a standby power system where they make their own power on site potentially, and the power is available to them from the grid. What that allows is you have a switch, a transfer switch. On your side of the switch, you can do whatever you want. PG&E is not involved in your solar array design and your battery design. You have a standby power. Now you can, as we are making our design match PG&E's goals, so we can turn it over to PG&E in 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Sonoma Clean Power would like it on year 1, thank you. They think that battery is so big and valuable to them, that solar array is so valuable, they'd like us to put this on the grid immediately. Maybe that will happen. But right now, we're just trying to say, we can do it without your approval, PG&E, because PG&E usually delays people by 7 years if they're asking for a microgrid. Give up, right? That's PG&E's approach to this. Don't ask. We're not here for that. So this is why we've had to make an approach of standby power to make sure that we can just at least move forward. We're using the most environmentally beneficial batteries. Essentially, these are all recycled. They're coming out of Teslas and Nissans. We're probably just going to focus on Teslas as the most available car. Redwood is the name of the company that we're partnering up with. We've helped them get a $20 million grant from the Department of Energy, which is putting in these batteries in a tribal nation in Minnesota, Red Lake. A zero energy artist development that we worked on in New Mexico. It's low-income housing for artists in Las Cruces. It's going into the Hoopa Reservation up here at a medical clinic, and then this apartment complex. And so these are all recycled batteries, a Nissan or a Tesla, whatever, pick your car. When they're done and they're getting recycled, they're usually 20% down from their maximum capacity of the battery. That's the degradations. You lost 20% over that 10-year lifespan. That's the worst case. Redwood is, they have their expertise is in testing batteries, so they can pull the batteries out and pair them with the right voltages and their power capacity, and then set them up in big banks so that we don't mine at all. We just take cars that are going into the trash pile, take out their battery, turn that metal back into a raw resource. I'm going up to the chat in case there's any questions there. I'll send out my slides afterwards. I actually already sent them. So people are figuring out stuff, EUIs, nice external shading, energy use intensity once again. Okay, here's the question. Understand choosing reams over Sanco 2s, but did you consider having the Sanco 2 serve large apartments? Yes. Our pricing was for Sanco CO2 boilers, not for individuals per apartment. So it was as low cost as we could get it. We've done that in a lot of apartments, so it's an area of expertise on ours. It's just well understood. It's a more expensive system. Has thermocork been accepted as siding by our local housing jurisdiction? I don't know that. I know that it's been a product in the United States for 10 years and that it's all over Europe, but I don't, each housing jurisdiction is its own beast. Will the complex have communal laundry machines? Yes, they will all have communal laundry machines. That's where heat pump commercial laundry machines. Do they take twice as long to dry as a residential heat pump dryer? Like, they take about 50% longer. We're going to be putting in half heat pump dryers and half electric resistance dryers so that we can have fast ones and slower ones that are more energy efficient. That's our sort of compromise to deal with that issue. Robert, you were asking how many focus per apartment, and it's one per bedroom and then one in the living room. $3,800 a pop at that scale, all installed. And they heat up to 15,000 BTUs, the models that we're putting in, and we're putting them in so at 15,000 because they get derated when it gets 125 degrees outside. And so we want them to still be able to meet extreme air conditioning loads. So we're putting in larger than people might think is necessary, but it's only getting hotter. And Petaluma is getting up to like 110, 111. So we want to make sure people are always safe. This is all about resiliency. Okay. Now I just showed you the recycled car batteries, and now I'm showing you that all of these vehicles out there but use the battery while it's in the car. So these are all headlines I just grabbed from the last year. GM says its EVs are going to be ready to power your home by 2026. Kia out of Korea and Wallbox, which is a leading EV charger, they're partnering up to get Kia's EV9s, which are already being used in Utrecht, Netherlands. So I showed you that city that, I just only kind of mentioned it. There's a city in Netherlands that is trying to make the entire city 100% renewable immediately by deploying bidirectional EV chargers over the entire city. They're targeting 15,000 of them. They've got about 2,000 installed now, and they're pairing them up with parking lots in the public that have solar arrays over the whole side of it to pair the production. But that's their goal, is local wind power right outside the city, solar everywhere, and cars doing the balancing. And they've been doing it for years now. You can watch little documentaries and such. Volvo is working with a Canadian bidirectional EV charger, which I think is Decibel. Yep. Decibels are for sale now in California. Ford, BMW, and Honda. The Decibel is, I think, the only available residential bidirectional EV charger. DCEBL, Decibel. They're goofy in the way they want to spell things. And it's called ARA, A-R-A, like decibels, ARA. Actually, this is a typo. That's funny. They didn't even realize it. It's spelled D-C-B-E-L. This thing I'm circling at the bottom of my screen here, but the actual newspaper article has a typo and they didn't realize. Okay, so it's D-C-B-E-L. Okay, Rivian, they already have it. Mitsubishi is adding it. Nissan Leaf has been doing it since 2011. It's warranted. You can discharge your car multiple times a day. Go for it. So this is a year old, and EV sales have gone through the roof, and utility batteries have gone up. So I'm not sure if it's exactly the same ratio, but it's very close. Last year in June, in California, left-hand side, that's all the power walls, all the LG Chem batteries on the walls. In the middle, that's everyone's driving around batteries. And on the right-hand side, that's all the batteries that have gone into the grid. There's 3 times as much battery on wheels. This is the global phenomenon. Utilities, yeah, they're buying batteries. People are buying crazy amounts of huge batteries. On the right-hand side, you can see Honda, which is an electric vehicle manufacturer, with WRI asking people the question of, if we gave you $500 a year, would you sell power into the grid? 67% said yeah. If we gave you $750, goes up to about 80%. If we give you $1,000, it's almost 90%. And 50% of people will do it for free. So it is a real opportunity. That is the battery, and it's the fastest growing battery. So we modeled it in. What if we had 25 cars? What if we had 50 cars? It depends on the amount of energy we pull out of them, but basically we're pulling out of them. On the left-hand side, this is what it looks like our battery, which is this says 2,000 kilowatt hours. We're actually putting in a 4,000 kilowatt hour one, but same pattern. On the left-hand side, this is the winter time, and the right-hand side, this is the winter time. And you can see there are periods of time, even with a really big battery, that we're gonna have to pull electricity from somewhere, because it's empty at the bottom. When the blue line's at the bottom of the graph, that's an empty battery. On the right-hand side, this is our model when we have cars that we can pull from them about 30 miles of driving. Somewhere between 10 and 30 miles of driving is what we were asking for people to sell into us, or actually, we're giving them free electricity every day. So we're asking just for them to give it free back. We're asking for about $50 of electricity back in return for the $3,000 to $4,000 that they consume. So they net many thousands of dollars. And we think this is a good deal. Considering at $1,000, everyone will do it anyway. So how about 3,000, you know? And they get dedicated parking spaces, which people fight over otherwise. So we keep our battery full. And now I've finished. I'm ready for any questions that you have. Any comments that you thought like, hey, have you thought about this? And Nick Brown, you say, what's your plan for the battery? Location, fire protection, finding that to be a tough detail on projects. We're going to remove some of this parking lot. Like, we're moving in the direction of getting the e-mobility hub from the city of Petaluma, where we have free cars there, and we're going to remove some of the parking therefore, which is the most distant from other buildings. So that's how we're going to deal with setbacks. Then we're going to, not everyone can do this. I realize like every site, every project is different. So that's our approach, is use some of the parking lot for this big battery. Fire protection comes with air conditioners that are in them, keeping them cool. Fire sprinklers, because we're going to have this canopy over it, so we can do fire sprinklers. And we're thinking about that for the whole parking lot in case there's a car fire. Now, if you're aware, gas cars catch on fire more than electric cars. I was in a gas car that was on fire once. I was hitchhiking, and the guy pulled over with the car on fire and ran in and grabbed someone's soda pop and came out and put it on the engine. And then he's like, you want to keep on driving? And I was like, no effing way. Are you nuts? And I walked the last mile. But that happens. You know, gas cars catch on fire. But apparently, like, a soda pop can solve that. So we're not trying to overemphasize the risk, because gas cars catch on fire way more proportionally and just generally. So that's our fire protection system. And we're designing this in concert with the fire department. You know, they know what we're doing here. So all of that, keeping them cool with air conditioners, keeping them sprinkled, keeping them shaded, you know, all of it. Does EFOCA provide air filtration during smoky days? Yes, we can get a MERV 13 filter put on them for their ERV function. They have a strong enough fan to push through a MERV 13 filter. And as I said, we're debating whether or not we should do central MERV 13 filtration for the apartments with a dedicated ERV, or if the EFOC would be the less expensive way to do it. Haven't made up our mind yet. Cheryl Lima, you asked, does the standby tariff apply to single family residences? Let's go look at this thing. Okay. So, sorry, I have to move okay. Here's the customers whose supply requirements would otherwise be delivered by PG&E owned facilities, right? Got it. The word facilities gets me a little bit like, who at times take auxiliary service by means of a double throw switch. Okay, that could be you. Who require PG&E to reserve capacity and stand ready at all times to provide electricity on an irregular and non-continuous basis. That could be you if you only wanted a little bit. Like, let's say you got a Nissan Leaf right now and a Fermata bidirectional charger or a Decibel bidirectional charger, both of which would work with it. And you had 2 cars and a solar array. And you could leave sometimes with one of the cars, go charge it up and bring it back. So essentially you always had access to a charged battery or 2 at your house plus the solar array. Okay, so that's what it means by irregular, non-continuous. Every once in a while. Whose non-utility source of generation does not qualify under items A or C above, but qualify for an elect to receive backup service under the provisions of 7 below. Okay, who have 1 or more generating units certified under CAISO's tariff station power protocol, for which the customer self-supplies station load by netting any energy delivery services against station power in a given month. So, yes-ish. It doesn't seem to say houses are not allowed, and it does allow for all sorts of housing situations like fire halls. Like, this is for fire departments, and they have beds upstairs and a stove and showers and the rest of it. It's very small multifamily. You know, this is not even like always there. So I think that this works for just a single family residence, but it has not been explored to my knowledge. And Tor, I think I answered your question. Efoca can provide air filtration, but it's an add-on. Tom Phillips, you were saying this also impacts water heating decision, indoor versus outdoor location for venting versus central heat pump water heaters. Yeah, so when you were saying above, how did we factor in the climate change and heat waves? So 2 things that we did is once is that we got the heat pumps, the Focus tested in the Italian lab up to 125 Fahrenheit to make sure that they maintain their cooling productivity so they could survive. We did passive house, but say it again, in the summertime, it creates a larger air conditioning load than if we didn't do passive house. Title 24 has less heat retention in the summertime, which becomes the issue. So that's why we really focus on our air conditioners. And we put in this auxiliary air conditioner, which is the heat pump water heater. It's doing only a tiny amount of work. It's a 4,000 BTU air conditioner that's smaller than the smallest window air conditioner. And the compressor in your fridge freezer is of a 3,000 BTU compressor, so it's a little bit bigger than a fridge freezer. But that is our supplemental air conditioning. And we're really going hard on this resiliency where we'll always have power. We'll have a battery, we'll have cars, we'll have stand-up power from the grid, we'll have a solar array. We are trying to make sure that we can keep those air conditioners going, and we'll always have a stock of them in reserve. That's how they get maintained, is that they get sent back to the factory anyway. So we're gonna have like 5 or 10 of them in boxes, and that's how Danco already now manages. So that if one of them breaks, we can rush in there and just clip it off the wall and put the next one, clip it on the wall, plug it into the wall, and you're done. That's their packaged unit. So that's the answer, is our heat waves, is that our passive house creates a heat wave problem, and we are solving it with a lot of electrical resiliency measures and shading on the windows. South and west windows get shade. Okay, so that was Tom's asking about that. I've sent the slides on for anyone who wants them downloaded. Debbie Chambers, you say Nissan Leaf. You see Irvine used them 10 years ago as a fleet vehicles to absorb the daily duck curve midday overproduction. First place I ever saw this is great. Yes, it started in 2011 after the Fukushima meltdown, right? And all the nuclear power plants in Japan were shut down instantly overnight, 30% of the nation's power. And so Nissan started letting people use their Leafs, which then were like 25 kilowatt hour batteries, to provide power in the evening because they had only coal and nuclear, two kinds of power that don't ramp up or down. They're just steady. So you shut down the nuclear power, all you have is steady coal, and everyone comes home. So they started letting people use them that way. And then the Air Force put them in, and UC Irvine and Hawaii put them in all in like 2014, 10 years ago. And no one really since then. Okay, so Christian, not in the United States. They're all over in Eurasia. Christian, you say, how will you finish the cork facade? We're going to paint it. What air and weather barrier strategy do you use? We're going to be taping down tar paper, most likely. I don't trust Tyvek. That stuff's garbage. So I want to use a thicker paper and tape it well. Ian, you're saying, what a cool project. Yeah, it was a big collaborative effort. So Debbie says, Sean, what is the daily discharge schedule for the battery storage, daily, winter, or whenever needed? Let me show you the battery. So like I said, we were starting for a while with a 2,000 kilowatt hour battery, but we got a grant to do 4,000 kilowatt hours. And then we're struggling a little bit with our solar array. So anyway, you can see that starting in about March, the battery discharges each day about 500 kilowatt hours. And it goes down to maybe like 600 to 400 most of the year. That's our daily discharge. And then we start having problems in the wintertime where we start discharging 1,500 kilowatt hours in a day or a couple, 3 days, because they're just not keeping up with the sunshine. And then we can discharge over the course of, it takes about 3 days total is what I've seen, with very, very limited sun before we're truly out. And so that's what these represent. So I'd say we have in the range of like a 72-hour battery. Tor, you're saying, what's the timeline for getting construction? We start next June. We just this last Monday, last week, we found out that the project got its tax credits, which is the last chunk of the money. So with the tax credits now, we get officially awarded like in December, and then we have about 6 months of financing and getting the building permits finalized before we break ground. So June is what the expectation is. Cheryl, you asked about water conservation. Yes. So not only are we doing 1.5 shower heads, 1.0 sinks, but we're also doing gray water off of one of the buildings from just the showers, which is the cleanest source of gray water, and using an aqua loop, which is the only gray water treatment system that's allowed for irrigation. So we're going to be able to spray this above ground. And we're also putting, of course, super drought tolerant plants and weather sensing controls and drip irrigation. But it's mostly about not using the water as much, and then we're going to reuse some of it. But it's expensive. Honestly, it's very expensive to treat water on site. So we're doing a small aqua loop for about $18,000 to buy it, and then installed is probably 3 times that amount. So then I see Debbie Chambers, you're putting in great information about the AO. The IFOCA AIO means all in one, AIO. So they're always messing around with their names, to be honest. IFOCA isn't their real name, but Innova is. But there's a company in Florida called Innova Air that they were competing with. So they call themselves IFOCA, which in Italian is AFOCA, but no one says that in America. But that's their actual name, is AFOCA, it means epic. So Robert Haw, you say, without grants, can you share a rough comparison on cost of this project versus a legacy building built with the same amenities? Okay, so code minimum building is what I would call legacy, if that's kind of what you mean. So here, how about this? We are going to spend $8 million. And we have gotten a total of grants and rebates and incentives of $12 million. It is a net financial gain to Danco of $4 million to do this project, and they weren't going to do it when I only offered them $1 million. So We just got through this with we accumulate enough incentives because they want replacement reserves for the batteries. They want replacement reserves for this like 6 times larger solar array. Like, you have to give us some money because we have to maintain this stuff. You guys leave in 4 years. So having accumulated enough money to take care of replacement reserves, I can say it is an $8 million upfront cost to do everything that we're talking about. And about $6 million of that is the solar and the batteries. And then we have other things that we're chipping into, controls and EV chargers and landscaping and gray water treatment and such. But here is an example of how it's cost effective. So Tor, you're pointing out that currently only the Ford F-150 Lightning and Charger are approved for vehicle to grid in PG&E area. To my knowledge, they've not actually been approved for vehicle to grid, but instead vehicle to building. And you're asking, are you anticipating using a charger that is less car and brand specific so that other vehicles can be utilized? It's a great question. Okay, so how are we going to deal with the fact that there's a lot of different chargers out there and different vehicles partnering up with different folks? We're putting in a diversity of chargers. So we're going to have Nissan, they pair with Fermata. Understood. Kia, they pair with Wallbox. Got the message. You know, the buses that are coming in, they're Romberg, like Warner, Romberg, something or other. I forget there. It's some bus charger that's bidirectional. We're putting in like probably 15 of each. And that was our original idea. We're working now with Petaluma to get all 50 cars being the city-owned cars. When we have a fleet that way of cars that are essentially rental cars for the tenants, discounted rental cars, just like they get discounted bus passes, and they're right next to a train station. With this e-mobility idea of doing community car share, like Colorado has a community car share that we're modeling ourselves from. In Utrecht, Netherlands, I mentioned, they have a 300 EV car share that they're doing as bidirectional EVs. So that community car share, we think, is our best way to simplify the match between the EVs and the car chargers. But we're prepared to put in diversity to deal with the wildness of just people bringing their own cars to the situation. But we're working towards having an e-mobility hub that handles that. Nick Brown, you're saying, I'm finding that no California electrification retrofit incentive program seems to allow for non-permanent HVAC systems such as EFOCA and window heat pumps. Any advice on that? I think that the low-income weatherization program, LIWIP, does, but it's for low-income programs, low-income housing specifically, and houses that are in disadvantaged communities, apartments. They will put in EFOCAs. To my knowledge, you're correct. They don't put in window heat pumps like the Gradient yet. We're field testing them right now and installing them for the last few weeks in people's apartments up here. Hopefully that policy will change as we demonstrate that they work and they're ready for LIWIP funds or others. Shruti, you say, if you had the opportunity to modify Title 24 to better support the development of projects like Petaluma's, what specific changes or additions would you recommend to make it easier to implement innovative design practices such as passive house or off-grid technologies? Well, Title 24 doesn't take into any account vehicles, zero. So you can't even think about this. You can't think about it in either direction. You can't say, is my house using more power than I thought? Or solar array size it so you get zero to energy because I've got a car charger. None of that. So all of the software is just completely silent on it. And that is a very significant component of the energy draw of this because people's homes at this apartment complex use less energy than their driving does each year. That's the larger load. So I think that now that Title 24 has always said that, well, we're not in charge of cars. We're also not in charge of swimming pools. We're not in charge of elevators, not in charge of parking lot lighting. They have a lot of things they don't do. But I think that excuse is wearing thin when vehicles are code mandated to be EV chargers in every house, code mandated since 2016, the capacity. And we've had 2019 code mandated EV charging in apartment complexes. On passive house, as you know, the thermal bridging is the weakness in Title 24. They do a lot of assembly studies. They're pretty serious about it. They consider themselves to be an excellent piece of thermal software. Everyone knows the passive house is better and way more specific. But if you were to ask, like, what do I think is a weakness of it? I think it's thermal bridging. Tom Phillips. What are the transportation impacts of the project and opportunities to shift from cars to bikes, walking, mass transit? The site image looks like a rural, I apologize, it's not a rural location. It's kind of in the city. It was just because the graphics, so here, see the project site to the left? There's like big box stores and the postal service semi trucks coming in, and okay, and the train station is literally right next to it. That is the design, future train station parking. And there's 13 buses that come here dropping people off at the train station. And we are EVing the heck out of this place, including outside EV bike well, e-bike and scooter like charging stations. I don't want them inside people's homes. That's a little too dangerous to have that many batteries in people's houses. We've seen fires in New York City prove that. Granted, those batteries are not necessarily licensed batteries in the United States, or cheap ones that people are finding, but still. Okay, the EVs still have a lot of embedded carbon. Absolutely. You see how we're recycling EV batteries to try to reduce that impact. And yeah, Petaluma is a big problem, but we're trying to lead, really trying to and work with the city of Petaluma closely to implement their vision and their dreams. Because we got this project because they kicked out the other developer who was going to put gas in. And so they gave it to Danco Communities as a developer who was committed to all electric construction in all of its projects. So we're working closely with the city. When John McKenna, you say, what's the definition of thermal bridging? It's where you have like the 2x4s or 2x6s. They're not well modeled in the way that they pull heat through them compared to the insulation next door. Or when you have a balcony that attaches into the building, and the balcony has all this wood or metal or both, that attach into the framing of the building, and it starts making the floor of the apartment cold. There are just like various places where there's connection points between the outside and the inside that are not well modeled in Title 24, but they are in Passive House, and they have impacts on both comfort and energy consumption. And with that, I have to go to my next meeting. So you guys are so delightful. Hopefully I got to almost all the questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Yeah, invite me back anytime. I love doing this stuff. It's my favorite thing to meet with a whole bunch of other professionals and nerd out and dig in.
Well, thank you for being you, Sean. This
Absolutely.
was fabulous.
You guys take care.
Okay, I can say we can say another minute or two. Thermal bridging. If you don't know what thermal bridging is, if you have an easy way to think of it is you have an iron frying pan at home, you know not to grab it when you're cooking something because the handle gets as hot as everything. However, you have a rubber skillet with a little thermal break so that the handle doesn't pass through. That's what you do with buildings is you eliminate that passing through. And in terms of here in terms of just the final show up here, let me share the screen as we need to go. This is where we were. We are first of all, thank you. The call to action, if you're interested, is now that you've learned something, you're smarter, be smarter. With Passive House, if you'd like to support Passive House California, you can sign up for the newsletter, as Jed put something in there. We have individual professional memberships. You can join as an organization or company, which does include an individual professional membership. You can look at a sponsor or volunteer, and you can go to passivehousecal.org and find that information. So thank you for taking the time to be here and learn about things. Spread the word like the light bulb that you see there is it's the only one lit, but it's spreading that light all around it. So let's do that. Let's do that going forward. And thank you very, very much. I'm going to stop share and Kim, you can sign us off if you like.